Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Inside Pitch with me, Joe Mansolino, and my co-host slash producer, Mr. Brian Lehman. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm just out here producing those slashes.
We've got some pretty good slashes going on. Pretty good slashes. So, baseball is getting exciting this time of year. We got a couple really good races, a couple runaways. Things are looking pretty good.
Yes, they are. Matter of fact, I'm excited to see how MIA is doing today.
Oh,
Are they still leading the pack? I'm counting on it.
oh, they are. They are.
All my
But
friends.
not quite the whole way. You'll be surprised.
Really?
You'll be surprised.
You mean I'm going to lose money?
Well, who knows?
It
Who
could
knows? Let's hope not.
It could happen.
Let's hope not. So what do you think of what's going on so far in baseball?
Well, baseball's been a lot of fun, but when they start throwing football out there in the middle of it, especially playing football on baseball diamonds, it does tend to tacky up the field a bit. But
Okay, well, I'll go with that. Let's see what's going on so far. In the National League East, the Braves are very comfortably in first, followed by the Nationals. Then the Mets and the Phillies are fighting it out for third, and your Miami Marlins are pulling up the rear. MIA. In the Central Division, the Cardinals are fighting it out with the Cubs and the Brewers. They're all neck and neck, right in there, 1, 2, and 3, fighting for that division. That's going to be a nice race all the way. Followed by the Reds and the Pirates trailing the pack in the Central. And in the National League West, the Dodgers are in first place by far. They've already clinched the division. Followed by the Diamondbacks, the Giants, the Padres, and the Colorado Rockies. And in the National League, the Dodgers have the best record in the National League at .642, and the Marlins have the worst record in the National League. Now let's go to the American League. In the American League East, the Yankees are in first place, followed by the Tampa Rays, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and pulling up the rear there is the Baltimore Orioles. In the Central Division, the Twins and the Indians were real close last weekend. They were fighting it out, but the Twins won some clutch games. They're right now in front in the Central with the Indians close behind. And then trailing are the White Sox, the Royals, and the Detroit Tigers with the worst record in not only the American League, but in all of baseball with a winning percentage of only .302. In the West, the Houston Astros are first, playing great baseball, followed by the Oakland A's, and then the Rangers, the Angels, and the Mariners are pulling up the rear. But those races in the Central with the Twins and Cleveland is pretty close. The Central in the National League is very, very close between the Cardinals, the Cubs, and the Brewers. That could go all the way down to the end. What do you think? I know you're happy your Braves are in first.
Well, of course, anybody who's been a long-term Braves fan is just waiting for them to swoon. It's kind of like what they do. They'll get into the playoffs, and all of a sudden they'll start saying, hey, we need that bullpen to pitch. And guess what? It never works out well.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see there because they've played pretty good baseball all year long so far. So that is going to be exciting to see how they do and what they do.
Good point. I know a lot of folks are hoping they get out there and make it back to all the way to the World Series. But like I said, those of us who've been with them for a long time just know, they have a way to fold like a cheap suit.
The Astros and the Yankees they're playing great baseball. They're fighting back and forth to have the best record, not only in the American League, but in all of baseball. The last few days, they've been tied with the best record. So it's a very close race between them for that. And I just got to say, Houston is what we've been talking about on this show all year long. In my opinion, they're the only team that's really playing old school baseball. They're not swinging for the fences. They actually hit up the middle they hit to the opposite field. They have good pitching. They have good defense. They're hitting well. They're gelling at the right time. I think they're a team to watch in the American League.
Well, something to be said for that. Of course, I'm more of a National League guy, but you can't argue with the results of those guys on the other side.
I mean, Houston used to be a National League team, but they're just, that's going to be a tough race between them, the Twins, the Indians, and the Yankees.
Good point.
That's going to be very fun to watch with a month to go.
Yeah, it's funny that when the Astros were on the National League side, they just never could seem to do anything. Then they get in the American League, and suddenly it's just like it all comes together for them.
It must be because their pitchers don't have to bat anymore. That's got to be really important in baseball.
Well, the funny thing is, when they were in the National League, people said that their pitchers couldn't bat anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think not only do we wish old school baseball was played by every team, but I think we got to go even back to no designated hitter. They're just not real players, in my opinion. They're hitters. Closers are one-inning pitchers. That's not a player. That's not a pitcher as far as I'm concerned. But we probably say that almost every show.
Good point. Matter of fact, look, we just got a phone call coming in from somebody who claims to be an American League fan telling us that we could... Oh, never mind. We don't want to talk to them.
That is not true, folks. We take all phone calls. All phone calls. And emails. Remember our address, myinsidepitch@gmail.com. Send us your questions, your comments, what you want to talk about. myinsidepitch@gmail.com, and we will respond and let you know at least what we're thinking, which could be scary sometimes.
And it'd probably be brief.
It may be a one-word answer. Who knows? But yeah, it's going to be really interesting races right down to the end. In fact, our guest today, Mr. Darrell Jackson, formerly of the Minnesota Twins, has his team. The Minnesota Twins are currently in first. They pulled out between Cleveland over the weekend and got a little lead ahead of them. He's going to be real excited, I'm sure, to talk about Minnesota being in first place. It'll be good to talk to Darrell.
Well, that's good. Matter of fact, nobody has to worry about getting... Oh, well, I'll stop there. That joke wouldn't work on the air, would it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you were going.
I just didn't want to see anybody getting pregnant since they pulled out too quick.
Okay. Wow. So that has a lot to do with those races that are going on. There's more than one thing racing in the Central, I guess.
Yep. They're all racing to the judge's office to get that overturned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, today's Joe's going, why is he throwing these left-hand curves at me? Because it's always fun to see him sweat.
I used to love left-handed curves. You could crush them right up the middle really easy. Loved those.
Why do I feel threatened?
Loved those. So, with things going on, they're fighting now for home field advantage. They're fighting to, of course, win their division. There's going to be some good races in the wild cards, depending on what else happens to win the division. This is really going to be an exciting month.
Yeah, matter of fact, all you folks at home are sitting there saying, my team has got a chance. Enjoy it, because it's funny how some of these teams get up there and they have their one really good year, and then all of a sudden they fall apart.
It really is. It's amazing to just see what happens and what experience has to do with it, because a lot of times the teams that have never been in the postseason, the further they go, the more they're pressured out of it. The teams that have been there before, will win. In the Dodgers' case, they've been to the World Series 2 times in a row, so they're going to have the pressure on them to A, make it 3, and B, to finally win one. And the Braves, the Cardinals, the Cubs, the Brewers, they all have something to say about that too. So it's going to be really interesting. This is going to be a good September.
Good point. So who do you think is going to make it on the American League side? Who do you think's got the best chances of the division leaders?
Right now, I would have to say the Houston Astros.
Interesting.
I mean, they're just playing really, really well. They're hot. They're, like I said, they're the only team that really has solid pitching, solid hitting, great defense. They hit again. They hit up the middle. They can hit to the opposite field. They're going to be tough.
Yep, good point. And see, the folks in Houston kind of deserve to have a winner because they've been so many years where their teams are getting the playoffs or whatnot in any sport and just kind of fade.
Yeah, and the Astros have been good for them the last few seasons, but this could be the one.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of folks at home that remember the old expression, go Astros and, take the Rockets with you.
This could be the year for Houston and the Astros. But I really think, the Twins and the Yankees, the Indians are all going to have something to say about that in the American League. It's going to be fun to watch all the way till the end. We're going to have some good shows as we get closer and closer to the playoffs.
Good point. I know the folks in Minneapolis are excited with the Twins.
They have to be. And speaking of which, we'll get our guest on the phone. Darrell Jackson pitched for Minnesota, but we'll get him on the phone and then we will talk to him. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest this evening is Darrell Jackson. Let me tell you a little bit about him before we get to Darrell. He was a star at the Arizona State University. In 1973, he was drafted by the Minnesota Twins, but chose to go to ASU, where they won the College World Series in 1977. In 1977, he was once again drafted by the Minnesota Twins. He was so good, in his first start, he threw 9 innings of no-hit baseball. 9 innings of no-hit baseball in his very first start. And after just 10 starts, he was called up to the major leagues. That's how good he was. He had a career record of 20-27 with a 4.38 ERA and 229 strikeouts. And while we're talking to him, he's going to tell us a little bit about what he's doing now. A great charity, a nonprofit organization that helps youth at risk called the 1020 Club. But we'll let Darrell talk about that. Darrell, how are you doing today?
Hey, Joe, I'm doing pretty good.
Well, good. Hopefully this will help and we'll be doing better. First of all, that's very impressive. The fact, the Twins went after you and got you twice. A 9-inning no-hitter in your very first start. That had to feel incredible.
Well, it was surreal, obviously. After struggling for 3 of my 4 years at Arizona State, my senior year, everything comes together. We win a national championship, and I was an integral part of that team that helped win the national championship by pitching a shutout in the semifinals over Southern Illinois. And then we go on and sign a contract with the Twins after being drafted a second time. The scout, Jess Flores, liked me because I reminded him of a pitcher that also pitched for Minnesota by the name of Tommy Hall, who was also a left-hander, and we were similar in stature. So I was drafted by the Twins again, and then I made the Double-A team out of spring training and pitched the opening night for the Orlando Twins and threw 9 innings of no-hit baseball. Unfortunately, the team didn't score, so I left the game after 9 innings in a 0-0 tie.
Yeah, and they won in the 12th by 1-0, but that had nothing to do with you. 9 innings of no-hit ball. I would say that would be a pretty good debut as a pro.
Right. And again, you don't expect something of that to happen that way, but it did. And, I was effectively wild. Obviously, I hadn't learned how to pitch yet. I was what I consider a thrower, and I threw the ball all over the place, just wild enough to prevent them from getting a hit, and kept the game scoreless. So call that being effectively wild. Yeah.
I like that. But, if they can't dig in against you, you have the upper hand already. That's a pretty good thing. And then after just 10 starts, you got called up to the big leagues. That had to be just as exciting as your 9-inning no-hitter.
Well, obviously, it's more exciting to get that call. I mean, you dream of being a Major League Baseball player. Obviously, the odds were stacked against me being 5'9", 5'10", if you will, 145 actual pounds. But I would suggest that I was 5'11", 165 on my paperwork. But being undersized and some other issues that off the field issues that would also make it a really difficult task of making it to the major leagues. And after 10 games and being called up and realizing that childhood dream was outstanding experience for me. And yeah, it was the happiest day of my life up until that point.
That had to be a big thrill. Let's talk a little about when you were called up and in your time with Minnesota. Like I said, you played with them from 78 to 82. Who were the most challenging hitters that you faced?
You know, in the major leagues, every team has one, two, maybe even three, or even four hitters that are challenging. They're professional hitters, but so many guys hit me hard and so well. But there's a couple guys that stand out: Toby Harrah, Buddy Bell, Al Oliver. Those guys were really difficult for me to get out. And then it seems that all the guys that I knew out of the Compton area where I grew up that I would face, my high school teammate Eddie Murray was hard on me, as well as a catcher out of the Giant organization who was eventually traded to Cleveland, also went to Locke High School where I went to high school. Gary Alexander also gave me a hard time. And how can I forget Danny Ford? Dan Ford and I were teammates in Minnesota. And once we traded him to the Angels, he seemed to hit me at will. So, you know, you'd be surprised that I didn't have. I don't hope he. I hope he doesn't hear this podcast. But Reggie Jackson, I didn't have too much harder time with Reggie, and I seemed to do okay against a great hitter by the name of Rod Carew. So, certain hitters I did well against that did well overall. But then there was hitters that just own me at will. Yes.
And that's the way it goes. I mean, that's the same with every pitcher. But just how exciting! I mean, some of the names of who you said were challenging for you. Those guys were challenging for every pitcher in the big leagues. They were some good hitters.
Yeah, and after understanding the game and how it's played, and eliminating the ego, you realize that today that I struggled to get those hitters out, but a real intelligent pitcher would pitch around those guys and not allow them to beat them. But my ego wouldn't. I challenged everybody, and I think that's why, even though I was a little guy and I threw extremely hard, guys respected me because I didn't run. I challenged them, and that's the old school baseball.
Sure is.
We played hardball, and you didn't want to be labeled as a pitcher that ran from hitters. You wanted to earn that respect by not running from hitters. But if I had it to do all over again, I'd run from hitters.
I don't believe that. You would still challenge them.
It depends. Depends on the game situation. But the ego is a terrible thing, and to try hard to not back down from anybody. Sometimes it's best to just surrender in order to win. And in those cases, they beat up on me pretty bad. But today, when I see these guys at golf tournaments at different events, they seem to have even though my career was pretty short, they seem to have a respect for me, those that did face me.
Because, to you, your career might have been short, but to those of us that were never able to make it that far, and the people listening who, didn't play minor league or anything close to that, I mean, that's a very significant career. I think you were great. You did a great job. I'm very impressed. Let's talk a little about, you brought them up. I was a Culver City boy the same time that you were in Compton, so we were close to each other. You guys had some pretty good players, like you were saying. Eddie Murray. Locke High was tough. That whole area was tough.
Yeah, well, Ozzie Smith was my shortstop. Eddie Murray's the first baseman. Richard Murray, who eventually would replace the great Willie McCovey in San Francisco at first base, was my catcher. My senior year, our high school team produced 4 major league players, and 2 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame, Ozzie Smith and Eddie Murray. But more importantly, during the summer, we played against guys like Ken Landreau and Gary Ward and Chet Lemon was on a summer team that I played on, as well as Lonnie Smith. So we can go on and on with names that came out of that Compton area. But we've produced some really good ball players.
You guys did. You guys did. It was fun even then, just seeing and knowing how good everybody was. I mean, there were some great players that made it. Even just to the minors, there were some great players that made it. It was just overall. I mean, Compton area in particular, but Southern California in general has some pretty good ball players coming up in those days, and still do.
Yes, they do.
Who would you say, in your whole time in the American League, who would you say was the best player that you ever saw?
Well, in the American League, over the 5 years I was there, the best player I ever saw. Wow, that's a really tough question. Obviously, when you're in the major leagues, you establish yourself. You're not as in awe as you are when you first come up. But to ask me who the best player I ever seen in the major leagues at that time, I'd say I would probably change it to the player I admired most was Carl Yastrzemski. There's something about Carl Yastrzemski that just demands respect. Just a great Hall of Famer professional. And even though I played against people like Reggie Jackson and Rod Carew, I'm going to go with Carl Yastrzemski.
How do you go wrong with him? I mean, you're right. He played the game the way it should be played. He worked hard at it. He was a class act. That's a pretty good pick. But so are some of the other ones you said, with Reggie. And, I mean, you played against some pretty tough guys.
Right. Well, like I said, Major League Baseball, and I wasn't, unfortunately, being, in my mind, a pretty good hitter. We didn't have interleague play, so I wasn't allowed to bat with the designated hitter. However, and we didn't play against the National League teams, but there were some great ball players in that era. But in the American League, I would go with Carl Yastrzemski. But the guy that, the straw that stirred the drink was obviously Reggie Jackson, and Mr. October was a man of, that did a dramatic, just Mr. Drama. There's nothing better than Reggie Jackson on the big stage. So Reggie was right there with Carl Yastrzemski. But overall, as a human being, a true professional, and a person that was just outstanding, I would fit Carl Yastrzemski with a guy equally with a guy by the name of Mike, known as Mike Trout today.
Yeah. Same style of player too. The two of them. I never related the two, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm talking about demeanor and character.
Yeah.
Not so much the physical attributes, but just the overall professional baseball.
Yeah, the way they approach the game, and that's a great analogy. I have to agree with that. That's very good. Let's talk about your most memorable moment. I mean, we talked about your very first start, after just 10 games. We talked about your 9-inning no-hitter. I'm sure it's one of those, and maybe it's not. What's your most memorable moment?
Well, again, the big stage. You're talking about being caught up to the major leagues and actually walking into Detroit Tiger Stadium and seeing your name on the locker, and then looking over and seeing a guy you idolize by the name of Rod Carew becomes your teammate, was a big moment. But the even bigger moment after that, after that call up to the major leagues, pitching in the great Yankee Stadium, a sold-out crowd, old-timers day, facing the mighty Yankees, who included the late, great Thurman Munson. Prior to the game, you had people like Phil Rizzuto and Yogi Berra and Mickey Mantle and all the great guys out there, Whitey Ford, prior to the game. And old Yankee Stadium is just an unbelievable place to play baseball. Dodger Stadium was what we grew up with here in Southern California, but I have to say Fenway Park has its character. It's second to none, but there's no place like Yankee Stadium. Just the greatest moment of my life to be able to pitch in that ballpark.
I bet it was, and There is a little bit of history and good ball players that played in that old Yankee Stadium.
Yes, it was. Yeah, being a Dodger kid growing up, Dodger, idolizing Koufax and Drysdale and Davis and Wes Parker and Fairley and Maury Wills
Wills.
and Roseboro. I mean, I could go on and on with the Dodgers, but I never thought that, and I always wanted to be a Dodger, but never thought anything could get better than that. And I know there may be some Dodger fans out there that will choke on what I'm about to say, however, but the Yankees are they're baseball, and everyone hates those guys in pinstripes. But as a non-player, ex-player, Minnesota Twins are my team. Will always admire and love the Twins for giving me my opportunity. However, but after the Twins, there's nothing like being a Yankee. It's the ultimate place to play baseball in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the fans love them. They are, you either love them or you love to hate them. Everybody has an opinion. Right. But, you brought the Twins up again. You had to be happy last weekend when they were going into the series with Cleveland, and they did pretty well.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to play when you have a big game, to be on the bench or in the game and playing. You don't get as nervous, but being a fan and watching and lacking any type of control, very happy with the team. Not sure. I don't know too much about their pitching staff. Matter of fact, I don't know too much about the Twins up until this year, and we just have a great offensive team, and they handled Cleveland very well. Obviously, Cleveland was picked to win the Central of the American League, but we're really happy with the Twins. They won again last night while the Indians were idle, so they're in the driver's seat, and we just hope that they don't have a major breakdown like my old manager Gene Mott did with I think it was the '64 Phillies.
Yeah, yeah, we're hoping not to. Yeah, we were talking before we got you on when we opened the show about that's going to be one of the races, between the Twins and the Indians all the way through the end of the season to see who wins. That's going to be a tough race to watch. Right.
Well, we have I hate to say it this way, and I don't want to jinx them, but we have based on the records of the teams, we have an easier schedule than Cleveland. We play Detroit, Kansas City, and the White Sox, I think, respectively. So I'll add the word respectively, but they're dangerous. Teams with nothing to lose are normally dangerous. I know when we were with the Twins, and this time of year, we're just playing for, you're playing out of pride, and
right.
And one of the most fun things it was to do was to knock off a so-called contender.
Sure.
You really got up there. You wanted to spoil their day as best you could. And really be a pest, like a fly that you can't get rid of in a room. So those teams are dangerous, but the Twins do have a lighter schedule.
Yeah, I agree that I think it is going to come down all the way. But the Twins are trying to pull away now, and they're gelling at the right time.
Right.
I think that's pretty good. On the field, what's one of the funniest things that you ever saw happen?
These questions weren't screened, and I didn't have time to really think about that. But when you talk about the funniest thing that happened, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that was really funny in my mind. A lot of times my good friend and close friend Kenny Landreau would tell great stories about Tommy Lasorda and the Dodgers and some of the things that happened when his years with the Dodgers. But with Minnesota, there wasn't really nothing really funny that happened on the field that I could remember. So that's the question I wish I could answer, but I can't.
That's okay.
And I'm not one to make things up, so I can't think of anything.
Well, I appreciate that. That. We here on Inside Pitch talk a lot about how the game is changing, and frankly, we don't like it. We like old school baseball where, hitters hit up the middle, they hit to the opposite field, they bunted. It wasn't all this, what's your arc, and we don't care about strikeout stuff. With pitchers, we liked that their goal was to pitch a 9-inning game, not just be a 1-inning pitcher. in today's game, how do you feel about the one inning pitchers?
I mean, I again, it's kind of hard to watch when you're a baseball purist. Obviously, growing up with managers and coaches at Arizona State, Coach Brock taught fundamental baseball. Gene Mock were fundamentalist, small ball kind of guy. It's really hard to watch. We, like you say, a starting pitcher started the game. They wanted to finish what they started. We very rarely wanted to put our game, if you will, in the hands of a reliever, unless it was an established closer. Even then, you really didn't want to come out the game. You wanted to take matters in your own hands. So I kind of have put aside my what I don't like about the one inning pitchers, but in today's scheme, the strategy and the way they set things up. Really, it's kind of neat because every pitcher has a role. Every pitcher is significant. And when I was playing, when you're in the bullpen, if you weren't a closer or a starter, you were more of a middle reliever, mop up type of guy. It wasn't a role you really wanted to be a part of. Now,
Right.
Every pitcher on that team has a significant role and can be called on, and you had a job to do. Even if it's pitching to a left-hand hitter, I come in and I have to pitch to Big Poppy or one of those guys, and even for that moment, even though it may be one or two hitters, it's a crucial moment in that game when I'm brought in to do a job. So from a player's point of view, I kind of like it because it makes every player, every pitcher on that team significant, as well. Unlike when we were playing, if you weren't a starter or a closer or even a setup guy, you were just considered a mop-up type of guy.
Yeah, you're right. And no one, any pitcher that we've asked that question to has ever elaborated like that. I think that's really good because you're right. Now everybody has, their own job, be it the seventh inning guy, the eighth inning guy, the closer. And you're right. If you were in the bullpen back in the 60s and 70s, it was because you were the mop-up guy who was going to come in if the starter got drilled in the third, fourth, or fifth inning. That's very true.
Right.
Most of those guys didn't want to be in the role they were in.
Right. You wanted to be in the starting rotation, and even today you're talking five starters, and you may have a spot starter. But going to the ball game, knowing that day you may be able to contribute to the team's overall success is something to look forward to when you're a pitcher. But the only thing I don't like is the pitch counts. I don't like it when, guy throws 25 pitches and he can't pitch another 2 or 3 days. It just drives me nuts because we didn't know anything about pitch counts. We pitched until it hurt, and and then we bounce back in between starts, and, we get loose and we go out there and go at it again. And today with the pitch counts, it drives me kind of nuts. But other than that, every pitcher has a role and they're significant, so I kind of like that.
That's a great point. But yeah, talking about pitch counts and therefore, leading to like complete games, an interesting stat that we have. In 1977, Jim Palmer and Nolan Ryan both led the leagues in complete games with 22. And there were 11 other players that had 17 or more complete games. And last season, in 2018, the most complete games were 2. Not
Wow.
22, 2. And 8
Wow.
pitchers tied for 2. And only 26 others had 1. That was it. Isn't that?
Wow.
I mean, that's just awful, I think. And back to who you were talking.
One of my favorite pitchers is Justin Verlander. I think he's still one of the old school
I do
guys
too.
that are still hanging on, and I can't think of too many more. But Verlander is the one that reminds me of, like a John Smoltz and those guys from the Braves, great pitching staffs that just were workhorses. And but today, 5 or 6 innings, 5 innings is normally a pretty good start.
A quality
Go 5
start,
strong
yeah.
innings.
I mean, I don't know how they consider it quality, but yeah, just 2 last year. And it's funny because Koufax, who we grew up watching in '62, he struck out 18 Cubs in his second complete game of the season, and it was still in April.
Wow. Yeah, I understand.
It,
I understand. Yeah, so it's a different game, and with the shifts, the defensive shifts, and like you said, moving the ball around and hitting behind the runner or hitting runs or stealing the base and the small ball and sacrificing runners over. And the other thing that we notice is the outfielder's ability to throw out runners at home plate. Guys are just touching third base, and the outfielder has the ball in his hands, and in mid, shallow outfield, and they're unable to throw out the runners. It's just crazy that you have major league ball players that can't throw a ball from shallow left field to home plate.
boy, that's for sure.
With any authority at all.
That's I mean,
It's just crazy.
you think of like Clemente looking at him going, really? And just counting
Right.
before he drilled them. I mean, it's just nuts. It really
Yeah.
is just.
Well, Landro didn't have a strong arm, but he had the fundamentals of being able to get rid of the ball quickly and accurately.
Kenny, yeah, I was going to
So-
say, Kenny's arm was very accurate.
Yeah, and it wasn't one of these overpowering arms, but he just had the ability to get the ball to the plate before the runner without much velocity on the ball. But then again, you got guys that, Ellis Valentine and some others that could just throw the ball like unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, like Reggie Smith. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nobody going to run on Reggie Smith.
Yeah.
He had that
Yeah,
cannon. Very, yeah, very. But yeah, I like Kenny's arm. I mean, it was good enough. He always hit the cutoff man. He always knew, and I think you don't see that anymore today either. Kenny always knew, no matter what the situation was, where he was going to go with the ball if it was hit to him, and you don't see that today. You know, you see when an outfielder picks it up, you could almost see him thinking, okay, now where am I going to throw it, instead of just throwing it.
Well, the reason why they said that, why I brought him up, is that while teammates in Minnesota, he saved my butt a couple times by throwing runners out. I'm backing up home plate, and the runners are trying to score from second, and he just charges the ball all in one motion and charges it, catches it, releases it, and just throws a strike to home plate. And so he saved a couple of games for me. I only won 20 major league games, and maybe 5 of those games were as a result of either Kenny offensively doing something or defensively doing something that helped his little roommate win a ball game. So I'm forever indebted to Landro. And then I also I don't think most people realize Kenny played 4 years of baseball at Arizona State and never made an error.
That's amazing. I mean, I talk about him every once in a while when we talk about players that are very underrated. And for me, he's on one of the top on the underrated list. I mean, I watched him with Minnesota, I watched him with the Dodgers, and he just never made a mistake. Like I said, he always knew where he was going to throw the ball. He would get the clutch hits. He was a great player who never got the props that I think he should have got. I'm glad you brought him up.
Well, today's ball game, we were talking about the pitchers and one-inning pitchers, but today's ball game, every man on the roster is significant. And even AAA ball players, they go down to AAA, they have to be prepared because they're bringing players up and down. Every team that they start with a 25-man roster, but so many players come and go, and I was going to say our Dodgers, but the Dodgers this year, so many different players have played. It's hard to keep up with them all, but from a player's point of view, it gives you an opportunity to play in the big leagues, which years ago, you played behind a guy like Rod Carew, you would hope to get traded, or you have to
exactly.
You'll never get out of the minor leagues. So.
Exactly, because you were stuck forever with him in front of you.
Any of those guys, that Fred Lynn or Jim Rice, any of those guys, if you played their positions and you're in the minor leagues, you might as well find it, because these guys, the Dodgers infield, together 10 years, Lopes, Garvin, Say, Russell, so.
Yeah, there was nowhere to go for anybody if you got drafted.
Roster.
Yeah, and they let quite a few players go to other teams who ended up being very successful wherever they went. But yeah, that was a tough lineup to break. Well, Darrell, I want to thank you very, very much for taking your time today and being on with us. It was a pleasure to have you. It was a pleasure talking about just how dominant you were in your day to get drafted by the same team twice, which shows they knew the talent. Having a 9 inning no hitter, your first professional game, being called up in 10 starts, just one hell of a player. And I want to thank you very much for that, for taking your time.
No problem.
Oh, you know what?
No
Let's
problem.
talk a little bit about. I'm sorry. I want you to tell us what you're doing now with your 1020 club. I really love what you're doing. Can you share information on that?
Well, Joe, if I could be real quick here, because we're talking about the baseball career, but my career was cut short because of off the field lack of discipline, of drinking and using drugs and partying, and I drank myself into a life of becoming suicidal after I left baseball. The great Doc Ellis, rest in peace, the late Doc Ellis reached out and helped me get my head back on straight, and as a result of that, I sort of had to recreate my life. And one thing that would fill the void of being a former ball player was reaching out and to our youth of America, I would say. And years ago, I started this outreach program called the 1020 Club, which means I work with youth ages 10 to 20, and we try our best to become mentors to misguided youth and try to help them avoid some of the mistakes we made. So I open up my life and share my innermost darkness with these youth to let them know that the choices they are making, how it could guide them into a really miserable life, and that if they make different choices. So we give them choices. You want to go down this path or that path, and we do that through my foundation, the 1020 Club. We incorporated in 1995. I've been active in Los Angeles County for over 20 years working with these youth, so we've reached out to thousands of kids. But the main thing we give them is just that so-called TLC. A lot of youth that are discouraged, they just need somebody to believe in them and accept them as they are. So we try not to be judgmental, and we try not to lecture. We just try and just bond and guide them accordingly. And we've had a lot of teenagers go on and do great things, but then we've also had some that have lost their lives, and some have literally lost their lives to death. But then we've also had some that lost their lives as long-term prison sentences. So you don't be around as long as we have and not have some failures. But overall, we've done some things that hopefully when that day of judgment comes, my Lord and Savior will say, a job well done. So.
No, I think he will. I've seen some of the awards that you give out to the kids and the way you've handled things, and it's very, very impressive. I know a lot of my family and friends are still in the LA area, and you're very well respected for what you do and the efforts that you put in, and you love doing it, and you can tell that. I think that's very impressive. How could the people listening, if they'd like to give donations to the 1020 Club, how could they do that?
Well, you can go to our website, 1020club.org, and we do have a PayPal. I guess it's a PayPal type of donations. It's a secured website, and donate it that way. That's not a problem. 1020club.org, and hit the donation sign. And if they want to donate, that would be wonderful. But we don't have an extremely large budget. We're a very modest program. I never wanted to grow to the point where I got so big I wasn't able to be hands-on. So when we talk about Darrell Jackson and mentoring, I don't delegate. I'm actually the person that is working with the youth. So they get to work with me personally, the parents, the families. I'm not just a part of the program in name only. I'm actually, meeting with the teenagers and working with the teenagers, and each and every one that comes to our program have 7 days a week access to me. So we're a very modest program, but 1020club.org, and they can donate that way. And we are tax 501c3, so all donations are tax deductible, and obviously we will send them a receipt with our tax ID number for their tax purposes, if that's needed or not needed. We still give you it is tax deductible. Yes.
That's wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, and he really means that. He is active with the kids, with appreciating them, making them feel a part of society and how valuable they are to the world. So please think about it. Do what you can. Go to the 1020club.org and help Darrell Jackson, help all those kids who we know are in need. Darrell, again,
Yeah,
go
I have
ahead.
a young man, Joe, that's like my nephew, and I wish I would pray. I doubt if he's going to hear this broadcast. I would love for him to donate something. That is his name is Andre Young, but he's known as the world as Dr. Dre, with the famous Dre beats. I grew up with him. I knew his mother when she was pregnant with him. And Andre, if you're listening out there, we sure could use your support, big guy.
Come on, Dr. Dre, chip in, do something, help Darrell out, help the kids out at 1020club.org.
Right.
Darrell, thank you again for giving up your time for us to share your insights and things. Brian?
Yeah, matter of fact, Darrell, this is Brian. I have one question for you, and it's great, all the work you've done and whatnot, but there was one thing that caught my attention, and for back in the 70s, instead of going with the draft into the pros, you went to college, which, like I said,
Right.
back in the 70s was a big deal. What drove you to do that?
It's called a father. I was 17 years old. Dad said, "You're not going to play pro ball. You're going to go to school. So if you get injured, you'd have something to fall back on." And so I was pitching against a team in summer baseball with a guy named Kenny Landreau on the team, and Arizona State was recruiting Ken Landreau and my teammate Eddie Murray, and I just happened to pitch a great game that night. They said, "Hey, young man, you got a great arm. Would you like to come to Arizona State?" So between my dad and Coach Brock at Arizona State recruited me. That's why I chose college over pro ball, because my father said, "You're 17, you need my signature, and I'm not going to allow you to play. You're going to go to school." So I went to school.
I can respect that,
Right.
I think in
So
the
that's
60s and
why
70s, that's what our
Arizona State.
fathers said. That was what we were going to do. That's great.
Right.
Great question, Brian. Darrell, thanks for sharing all your information, your career with us. We're very, very impressed with all that you're doing in the community today, and we want to thank you for taking the time to be on Inside Pitch.
Yeah, and go Bama. I love Alabama, even though I'm in Southern California. So that's my favorite college football team,
Roll
other
Tide.
than Arizona State. So
They're
Alabama.
looking pretty good again.
right. Okay.
You got it. All right, Darrell. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you, and have the rest of a great evening.
Okay, you guys take care. God bless.
All right. Thank you,
for
sir.
having me.
You take care.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, bye, Joe. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, org is just a great thing. He makes those children feel special. Just a really, really good guy. Good guy. I'm glad we were able to talk with him and share his story with you guys.
Yeah, and for the folks listening, you don't realize it was actually Joe had to do a little work to get him on the show with us because he wasn't sure about these two guys sitting over here in Alabama talking to him. So thank you very much for taking a risk on us and taking time to share your thoughts.
Absolutely, Darrell. We hope you had a good time. We did, and thank you for sharing everything. So remember, go to his page, 1020club.org. Give a donation or two when it's payday. Now let's go back to myinsidepitch@gmail.com. When you have questions, things you'd like us to talk about, please write us. All one word, myinsidepitch@gmail.com. And we will do our best to answer your questions. That was a great question you had for Darrell about going back to school and why. And I remember he graduated the same year I did. And I remember that's what our fathers were. They didn't care what your signing bonus was, if you got one, whatever. You were going to go to school first, because when you got hurt, you needed to have something to fall back on.
Yeah, it's not like today where these guys are, I'm going to make $1 million as a signing bonus. I don't care about college. And
No.
Of course, it's a crying shame, too.
Some people got the, hey, if you sign with us, here's your bologna sandwich and you don't have to pay for it.
Wow. I didn't even get that when I
See?
signed.
But you did. You led the league in strikeouts.
I did. And it's a record that still stands to this day, and I'm quite proud.
Last week we ended the show without doing trivia. So we don't have a question answer to give you this week. But this week's trivia question is, how many seasons did the great Hank Aaron hit 50 or more home runs? How many seasons did Hank Aaron, the true home run king of baseball, hit 50 or more home runs? Write in to myinsidepitch@gmail.com and don't cheat. And we'll let you know next week who had the right answer.
And the one answer you cannot use is all of them.
And those of you who are, Darrell brought up Alabama, those of you in the South Alabama area in Baldwin County, and you need a loan for your property, call our producer, Brian Lehman, at USA Mortgage at 251-616-0005, and Brian will be glad to help you. He does as good a job with that as he does with producing the show. So congratulations, Brian. And on that note, thank you all very much for listening to us tonight. Be safe and have the rest of a great evening.
Thank you all. Talk to you next week.